2007 was a huge turning point for Maplers in Singapore. MapleStory introduced Singapore as a new world tour area. It came with two towns, Singapore Central Business District, or CBD, and Boat Quay Town. On the day this patch dropped, I and many others scrambled to explore the new areas to see whether they did our homeland justice. And 17 years later, I'm now doing a deep dive into the map design, NPCs, quests, stores and monsters to examine how Singapore was represented within my favourite 2D mushroom game. For Singaporeans, I hope this gives you a dose of nostalgia and national pride. And for everyone else, hopefully this gives you a bit more context of certain features in MapleStory's Singapore, which you may have missed or not known about. To access this area, you speak with Irene in Canning City to buy a plane ticket. After waiting some time for departure, you would stand in a tiny plane with 5 windows. And this plane ride had an interesting feature. Whatever you drop from your item inventory can't be picked up anymore because it literally lands on top of the plane. So back in the day, some players found it funny to drop meso or even equips during the plane ride to taunt other players. After a really short flight, you would arrive in Singapore's Changi Airport. The left side of the map has a flight information board which displays flights to other towns within MapleStory, such as Sipangu and Hensis to name a few. The old flipboard featured here was used in Terminal 2 of the real Changi Airport from 1999 until it was retired in 2020, due to difficulties of maintaining the boards. The original flipboards were powered by motors and made up of more than 2,000 individual panels, which had to be cleaned individually. So you can imagine the effort that went into keeping the boards in operation and how this led to their eventual demise during the lockdown. In the background, you see the iconic air control tower as well, and there's also the standard features of an airport including the duty-free shops, currency exchange and so on. The main town map showcases a multitude of Singapore's elements, the most prominent one being the Sir Stamford Raffles statue that greets you first thing upon entering the map. In real-life Singapore, this statue is situated at the Raffles landing site, where he had landed over 200 years ago, and it is indeed close to the CBD area. Other than the usual potion seller, Singapore also has an NPC named Elwin who sells local specialties including Hokkien mee, carrot cake, and chicken rice, as well as some tropical fruits like guava, rambutan, and durian, amongst others. I would say that almost none of these foods are exclusive to Singapore, as they can oftentimes be found in other Asian countries as well, especially Malaysia. But there are certainly differences in the way that the dishes are prepared in different countries. And there is one dish in particular, Hokkien mee, which is prepared in a particular style that can't really be found outside of Singapore. So Hokkien mee is a prawn noodle dish with several variations originating from various parts of Singapore, Malaysia and Indonesia. But the version that's specific to Singapore is made from egg and rice noodles, stir-fried with prawn, pork slices and squid in a pork bone broth. If you were to order the same dish outside of Singapore, don't be surprised when the dish looks and tastes different. An iconic building that would catch the eye of all Singaporeans is the Esplanade. The building was opened to the public in 2002, 5 years before this map was brought to MapleStory. The Esplanade has a concert hall and a theatre where performances are held. It is endearingly known to many Singaporeans as the Durian, because the triangular sunshades layering its exterior closely resemble the spikes of a durian. The maple televisions adjacent to it are surrounded by 2 Malayans. The Malayan is a mythical creature with a lion head and fish body and is considered the official mascot of Singapore. The lion represents Singa, which is Malay for lion, and the fish symbolises Singapore's roots as a fishing village or sea town. One thing that really stands out to me now is the fact that there are so many rubbish bins in the map. This is in fact pretty accurate as it's not that difficult to find rubbish bins in Singapore. Singapore does have a reputation of cleanliness, and it's really interesting how much this was emphasized on, especially with quest lines and even monsters created based on this narrative. So this brings me to my next topic, the quests and monsters. Let's also take a look at some of the features in the training maps of Singapore. In Changi Airport, you are first greeted with a quest from Shireen. She asks you to clean up the streets of Singapore by collecting waste paper and recycled water bottles from the bin mobs. The mobs are level 18, making the quest really accessible to noobs like myself back then. Adrian calls for you to collect stop and speeding signs to stop speeding cars on the roads. As you head to Central Way 1, 2 and 3 to hunt the mobs for this quest, you'll see something that most Singaporean drivers dread, the ERP. ERP stands for Electronic Road Pricing and serves as an electronic toll system created to manage the number of cars on the road during peak hours, and charges depend on the location and the time that you pass through the gantry. In Suburban Area 1, you will see an MRT station. MRT stands for Mass Rapid Transit and forms the railway system in Singapore. As of this point in time, there are 6 train lines in Singapore, with one more currently in construction and will be open by the end of the decade. The line featured here is the Green East-West line, which, as the name suggests, stretches from the east to the west of Singapore. It takes about an hour and a half to travel from one end to the other, and the East-West line is one of 2 lines with the trains above ground. The other 4 lines are completely underground and do not look like the asset used here. Something else that I found interesting is that while the station number shown here is WZ5, which is the 5th station in the East-West line, the 5th station is actually very much east and far from the actual CBD in Singapore. The CBD area is more in the middle of the line around the 13th or 14th station. Moving up to Suburban Area 2, here is a map where I'm sure many of us have spent countless hours at, especially if you've played an Ice Lightning Mage. This is the only map that houses truckers. Truckers are level 48 mobs that give 160 EXP per kill, with each monster having 3000 HP. Compare that to Master Chronos, another popular training spot for level 40 players during the pre-Big Bang era. So do some quick math and you'll find out that it's 20% more efficient to train at truckers than Master Chronos. On top of that, truckers are weak to lightning. So for level 40 Ice Lightning Mage, whose main second drop attacking skill was Thunderbolt, the choice of training spot was obvious. Regardless, it was just an amazing mob all around. And safe to say, if you manage to find an empty map here, you'd be considered really lucky. Now if we finally move to the right of Suburban Area 1, we'd find ourselves at the town map. This town is modelled after the Boat Quay area in Singapore and is aptly named Boat Quay Town. In real-life Singapore, Boat Quay refers to the area spanning the shophouses in the CBD, all the way down the south bank of the Singapore River. And this is where a large majority of shipping trade occurred back in the early days of Singapore. And the port operations continued at Boat Quay until the 1980s, which is when the government took on the massive task of cleaning up the Singapore River. And as of today, most of the shophouses still remain because Boat Quay has been earmarked for conservation. And I can promise that it is just as, if not more beautiful than how it has been depicted in MapleStory. There are only 3 NPCs unique to this map. The first one is Candy, who is the potion shop. Another NPC or non-playing couple is Dave and Iris. They have a questline which calls on you to help with the Boat Quay cleanup by defeating the mobs in Mysterious Path 1 and 2. And most famously, on the very far right sits Ralph the Wanderer. Why do I say famous? In post-Big Bang global MapleStory, Ralph the Wanderer had a questline which was one of only 2 ways to obtain a portable badge. Potential lines can boost your stats by a certain percentage, even up to 30% of your main stat if you get 3 really good lines. And so basically everyone headed down to Singapore to complete this questline for Ralph in order to get the badge. The questline starts with Ralph telling the story of how he used to be a captain of a group of sailors, and while sailing they saw a ghost ship with a bunch of ghost sailors on it. They stopped sailing from then on and relayed this story to others, but nobody believed them. So he tasks you to go to the ghost ship and eliminate the ghost for him as revenge, and to help him feel confident enough to sail again. And after you complete the third quest, Ralph gives you a white essence which he instructs you to drop in front of an engine room in order to summon Captain Latanika. He reveals that Captain Latanika is a ghost that controls all the other ghost sailors. So until you defeat him, any efforts to rid the ghost ship of all its ghosts would be futile. It's not an easy boss to kill by any means. He hits really hard, so if you're playing a squishy class, you're shit out of luck. It gets even more annoying because every time you die to the boss, you have to give Ralph the Wanderer 300 ETCs from the Mr. Anchor mobs so that he can make another bottle of white essence for you. By the way, does anyone remember that MapleStory Flash game where you would play as a Night Lord and kill the boss? In pre-Big Bang times, I had to rely on that because I never got strong enough in the real MapleStory to even get close to defeating this guy. But anyway, after you finally defeat Captain Latanika, he drops the Soul Lantern, which is required for you to enter Cracksoul, a boss in the Ulu City area. As you leave, you get transported out into the peaceful ship and everyone's happy. And in post-Big Bang, you get your Ghost Ship Exorcist badge as well. So that's the questline for Quay Town. But let's talk a bit more about the Ghost Ship and the Mysterious Path maps. Of the 3 maps leading up to the Ghost Ship, you would mostly hear about the third one. In fact, Mysterious Path 3 was one of the more popular training spots back in the day. It's a pretty big but dense map, making it an excellent spot for party training. The first level even has a safe spot, which was perfect for mages who could attack the mobs without getting hit at all. There are also a ton of maps within the Ghost Ship, which were highly favoured training spots, especially being small and dense, and also having a safe spot in each map on the staircase. It was not uncommon to come across ranged classes just standing on the middle of the staircase and spamming their main attack skill. Some maps were deemed better than others though, with each map housing a different type of ghost mob. Ghost Ship 1 had Pack Pinkies, Ghost Ship 2 had Slimies, Ghost Ship 5 had Selkie Juniors, and Ghost Ship 6 had Mr. Anchors. Spawn rate was relatively similar across the 4 maps, but Slimies in Ghost Ship 2 gave the best EXP to HP ratio in pre-Big Bang MapleStory. And before you ask, Ghost Ships 3 and 4 have no monsters. They're just interim maps between the other Ghost Ship maps, but I think they're really just there to confuse us. Did I mention that the portals within the Ghost Ship aren't visible? So not only do you not know which door is a portal leading to another map, you also can't hover over the portals to see which map you're entering into next. So it's pretty much trial and error getting around the ship until you get the hang of it. This was probably the scariest part of the ship, and I now understand why Ralph the Wanderer quit his job. I thought this entire Ghost Ship area was pretty cute and a nice homage to the early beginnings of Singapore as a prominent trading port in the region. Looking back, I'm really thankful that the mobs in CBD and Quay Town were so overpowered because almost everyone put in quite a few hours training here. I find that similar to how real-life Singapore's strategic location and status as a free port really put it on the map, as it was easy for traders to stop by with goods and conduct business. MapleStory's rendition of Singapore was and will always be my favourite world tour area. The attention to detail was impressive, and you could tell that it was incredibly well researched. Of course, various elements were dramatised for entertainment, and this is especially apparent in the Ghost Ship dungeon area. Nevertheless, I think that I'll always be impressed by this piece of exclusive content in MapleStory. Unfortunately, the entire Singapore area was axed from Global MapleStory in October 2018 during the V199 update. Reasons cited by MapleStory included wanting to focus on areas that provide more meaningful value to players. They mentioned identifying areas that were outdated, difficult to maintain, or easily abused. And it's safe to assume that the removal may have been due to the final reason. Back in the day, MP3 and Ghost Ship maps were constantly overrun by botters. But this seems like a pretty weak argument, as removing Singapore would probably only have funneled botters to other maps. With Singapore being exclusive to MapleSea and GMS at the time, it was also speculated that there was little to no code support from KMS developers on this piece of exclusive content. As most of us may be aware, GMS follows KMS content very closely, and so there is an inherent risk associated with GMS implementing exclusive content that's not available in KMS. At some point, Nexon no longer had the resources and bandwidth to maintain and fix bugs associated with Singapore, which led to its removal in GMS. Some also suggested that the removal was because of the Ghost Ship Exorcist badge, which was considered the best in slot badge up to that point. This badge was insanely overpowered because it could have potential lines, and there was no equivalent portable badge in KMS. So some suggest that Singapore was removed so as to take the Ghost Ship badge out of the game completely for the purpose of leveling the playing field. Of course, this ironically hurt new GMS players who did not have the chance to obtain the Ghost Ship badge yet. It's also worth noting that while Singapore still exists in MapleSea, the Ghost Ship badge is not attainable in that server. Over the years, we've seen the loss of exclusive content such as Supreme World, Neo City, and Silent Crusade, to name a few. But the loss of Singapore hit GMS particularly hard. Singapore was almost a rite of passage for all Maplers at some point, whether it be the endless grinding at Ghost Ship and Ulu City, or because of the unrivaled Ghost Ship Exorcist badge. Today, the Singapore map is only available in MapleSea, which is apt in a way, but a sad outcome nevertheless. I'm sure many Maplers around the world still hold memories of the hours spent at Truckers, MP3 and Ghost Ship very close to their hearts. And I'm glad that they once had the opportunity to visit and explore Singapore in a game that we all used to love. I hope you enjoyed this video and maybe learned a thing or two. Let me know your thoughts, and if I got anything wrong or missed something out, do let me know in the comments. I'll see you guys very soon in the next video.